Welcome, students. What I have in front of you is a picture, a video presentation of my wife's college typewriter given to her by her parents. And this is the same or a similar type of typewriter that I learned in high school how to create a business letter. It was in typing class though. Okay, it was not in English class. Let's take a look at it. It's got a set of keys in front of you. My camera zooms by being moved around forward and backwards. Set of keys. If I type a key, you can't see, but there is a hammer that comes up, and the carriage is holding the paper. I can move the carriage to the right and back to the left. There you go. If we look down into the typewriter itself, there's a series of hammers that launch, striking a print ribbon, printing characters on the page. When I start at the left-hand side of the page typing characters, right now I'm just hitting the space bar. Eventually I will get to the right-hand part of the page, and I reach up and grab this bar, which is referred to as the carriage return, and move the carriage back over so that the hammers, I move it to the right so the hammers actually strike on the left. Okay. And the reason I'm doing this is I'm going to tie this into a blank piece of paper. I have inserted a blank piece of paper here into the platen roller. And then I was trained in typing class that the page was described to be an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. That's a letter-sized paper. And the characters were 10 characters per inch. So I'd have 85 characters across the page. And when I hit the carriage return bar, I would go up one line, and there were 66 lines on a page. However, it was standard business practice to leave a 1/2 inch margin on each side. So I would lose 1 inch on the height of the paper and 1 inch on the width of the paper. So I would have 75 characters across and 60 lines up and down. If I wanted to write a business letter, I would come down from the top of the paper 13, 14, or 15 lines. I would type in 123 any street. I would hit the carriage return, come back to the middle of the paper. The middle of the paper was 85 divided by 2 is 42.5. So it would be the 42th position. If we look down into the typewriter, there's actually a small ruler where I can see the 42nd line on the paper. My zooming is accomplished by moving the camera back and forth away from the typewriter. And then I would hit the carriage return. I would tab or space bar over to the 42nd page. Then I would type in any town, comma, Michigan, space, 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 the zip code, Then I would hit the carriage return. I would tab over to the 42nd point on the page, character point on the paper, and type in the date, August 17th or 18th, comma 2020. Then I would hit the carriage return 6 times, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Move the carriage all the way to the left, and there were margin controls where I could only move it, a ½ inch away from the left. And I would type dear sirs / madams : then another 2 lines, and then I would type in the business address, and then skip a space, actually the business address, and then dear sirs / madams : and then I would indent 5, type in the body of the business letter, skip a space, tab over to the middle of the page, type in sincerely, comma, then tab down 4 spaces, actually space down 4 lines, okay, tab to the middle of the page, type Michael Smith, underneath that perhaps my title, whatever that is, adjunct professor, and take the paper out, and I would have a good business letter. Why am I discussing this? Well, that's where word processing stuff in my English classes, which I think are now called language classes, I learned how to, with a pencil, write up my reports. Then I would take them to a typist, someone who would type them on a device somewhat similar to this, and lo and behold, I would have a finished business letter or a finished report. You wrote the first draft in pencil because it was modifiable. Maybe the second or third draft, depending upon how far along you were, you'd do in pen and ink. Okay. Always make sure that it was done well enough that the typist could type it up. Now, advances in the typewriter occurred during the 70s and 80s, where instead of a moving carriage at the top, there was a fixed carriage. You still put the paper in, but there was a typewriter called the IBM Selectric, and it had a round ball in the center that would act as a hammer and literally reach up from left to right, typing characters as you touched the keyboard. And instead of having to put pressure on the keys with your fingers, they, for the first time ever, became electronically sensitive. Okay. That's important. One of the most difficult aspects of my typing class when I was a senior in high school was making sure that the hammers hit the platen in such a way that my strong fingers, my index finger, my middle finger, even my ring finger, all of the characters were the same color of ink. And I had difficulty with my smallest fingers, my little pinky fingers over on the left and right, because they produced a lighter character, and I had to learn how to press harder with those because I was learning to touch type rather than 2 single fingers type with all of my fingers at the same time. That was the purpose of typing class. At this point, I've explained the origin of carriage returns, a carriage itself, the platen, none of which are required for this class. However, it's going to lead us into Microsoft Word and the blank document, which is essentially a simulated version of this whole typing scheme or scenario. Only it's all electronic, driven by early versions of microcoded software.